My name is Sarah Gladu. I'm the Director of Education and Citizen Science for Coastal Rivers Conservation Trust, formerly DRA and PWA. It's lovely to have you all join us, even if it is by Zoom. I'm sure we can still accomplish a fair amount, even if it's not in the more fun in-person version. So I also want to introduce Angela. Angela
Hello.
DeVoe. She's also in our two-person education department at Coastal Rivers. So she'll be hosting and letting people in and out. And in a few minutes, we'll probably ask folks to generally mute. But we're a small enough group, too, that if you would like to ask a question, you can either do it by chat, and Angela can help feed that to me, or you can unmute yourself and say, "Hey, Sarah, what about this?" And that's good too. So, anyway, so this class I had intended as kind of a introduction to wild edibles, and also as a way for people to think about, enlarging their repertoire, especially since a lot of times people say to me, "Well, I know how to make like a tea from something, but I don't really know how to eat wild edibles. Like, how would you actually make a meal from wild edibles enough to sustain yourself, even for a short amount of time?" And so I thought I would address that a little bit, since that does, first of all, it takes persistence, because it's harder than just taking the groceries off the shelf, as we all know. But then, just sort of how do you get what you need to feed, maybe yourself and a friend. So we'll talk about that as well. Is everybody let's put it this way, is anybody in the group not from this area, and so they don't feel particularly comfortable with, even the basic plants around here? I mean, I suspect you all are, you know what a maple tree is and things like that. But the weird thing is, with Zoom, we could have somebody check in from Venezuela who just has an interest in this area. So I just want to double check. But it sounds like everyone's basically from this region, which is convenient, because then we can kind of have a starting place. And so then the other question I had for you is, where would you, do you have any burning questions right off the bat that you want me to try to address? What I'm going to do is, first I'm going to talk about what is a wild edible, and how do you kind of evaluate how to go about getting started, and what are some safety tips, and then I'm going to do a little tour of this site with you by phone, and I'm going to mark the plants with my trusty flags and a pen. So if you want to come to this site and walk around and look at some of these same plants, you ought to be able to find them. If there's something that you're not familiar with, it would be helpful to kind of see in person. That might be useful. I'll do my best with the phone, but it might not be the same. So the place where I am, and we can send you the link via chat and otherwise in a little bit, it's 110 Belvedere Road in Damariscotta, and it's called the Great Salt Bay Heritage Farm, or Heritage Center and Farm. And this is where our Nature Center and Education Center is. So at any rate, any burning questions before we sort of get started about how you'd like me to address things?
I'm interested in mushrooms and sassafras.
Okay.
I would like to know how you could get the most calories to keep going.
All right. Well, those three questions are easy to address. Well, sort of. So the mushroom question, if I see any mushrooms, I'll try to identify them for you, but I'm not going to focus on them at all in this class, because I don't feel like, first of all, I'm not the best mushroom instructor that you could find. I recommend Greg Marley is a good person locally. David Spar is another good resource. Take classes with them to get you started, and they'll start you off learning, 5 mushrooms that you can identify, for example, without any hazards, and they're wonderful instructors. And also, I don't feel like Zoom is a great place to learn mushrooms, because they are super difficult, and I wouldn't feel good about about trying to do it via Zoom. So
Actually, Sarah, there was a piece in the Lincoln County News that Greg's going to do a class over at the Hidden Valley Nature Center.
right.
Friday the 25th is a couple hours of Zoom, and then Saturday afternoon is a live session. So
Great. That's a great addition. So yes, follow up with him via that class is a good idea. And the other question that you had was about sassafras, which we don't have here. So that's fairly easily addressed. Unfortunately, we do have sarsaparilla, and I can talk to that in a little bit. We'll probably see some of that later. And there's Angela's link to the site. Okay, and then the other question was, how do you get calories? Well, the most calories come from protein, of course. So you need to take up either fishing or hunting or oyster collecting. Here it would be oyster collecting because that's what people do here. But secondarily, the starches, which we are going to address, we're gonna look for some some tubers and so forth, which have the next highest quantity generally of and berries, things with sugars in them. And so I will address both of those today. There are several examples of both around here, both in way of starch-filled tubers and in terms of berries and fruits. So that'll get us started on that. I also want to start off by showing you a few useful guides. I don't know, other people can chime in too, certainly, as if you have other favorites, but oh, of course it looks backwards, doesn't it? Does it look backwards to you? Oh, good. This looks backwards to me. So this is the Newcomb's Field Guide, and it is a wonderful source of information when you're trying to identify herbaceous plants. It doesn't have trees. You'd have to go to another resource for that, but this has a great, very easy to, you have to put some time into working out the dichotomous key part of it. So it's not by color coding, for example. You can't look at just a flower. But what's good is you don't need the flower often to identify. It helps sometimes, but what you can do is if you've got something, you can look at all the other characteristics and narrow it down. So this is the Newcomb's Wildflower Guide, but it has, just about every herbaceous plant that you need to find in it. The Peterson Field Guides, there is a wildflower guide, there's a shrub guide, and there's a tree guide. They're all great. They also have a wild edibles guide. This is the Peterson's wild plants, edible wild plants. And this is a very useful place to get started as well. It has photographs, it has good descriptions, have basic information about what to do with the plants. And then there are many, many guides, along these lines. This is one that I happen to like because it has kind of a good diversity of different things. It is not strictly for this area, but it's another good option. So there are many good guides. Anybody else have one that they like particularly? And Angela and I can we'll send a follow-up email with this information in it as well, just to make sure you guys have what you need. And if I think of anything else, I'll certainly add it to that email. But
yes, I am writing them down as we speak.
Oh, you're good. Thank you, Angela.
Of course.
This is why it actually helps to have more than one person, on the program. So, okay.
If I may butt in, Peter Heil, just a title with a prosaic title that I've always liked is Stalking the Wild Asparagus.
Yes.
It is a good guide.
It is a good guide. He goes farther than most of us would dare.
Yes.
He was known to eat poison ivy, for example.
No.
So,
no, I won't.
There are some things you may not want to do, but it is an amazing, the Stalking the Wild Asparagus is an amazing book by Yule Gibbons is his name. And we can put that into our email as well. Yule Gibbons it's kind of a foundational book for a lot of people who are foragers.
Thanks.
And he wrote several other books as well. But thanks for mentioning that. So where I want to start is in your lawn, because it's right outside your doorstep. There are wild edibles in your lawn, most likely. And the first plant I'm going to introduce you to, there's actually 2 edibles right here. This is why I don't get very far in most of my naturalist led walks. I go very slowly because I can't walk very far without finding useful things. So now I'm going to annoy you slightly by turning my screen around so I can show you things. So pardon my finger. My dirty finger where I've been harvesting stuff. Okay. So anybody familiar with this plant? This is, go ahead.
Is it plantain?
Yeah, right. Plantain or plantain, right. Not to be confused with the banana plantain plant. That's not it. But this is our plant that we know as plantain, broadleaf plantain, and there is a narrowleaf plantain and a seaside plantain as well, all of which are edible. And this plant was also known as white man's foot. Well, by a term that translated as white man's foot locally, and the name is because wherever the ground was disturbed, this plant can flourish, like on a lawn or where people had trails and walkways. So you'll likely find this, around your driveway, and it has several interesting uses. One is if you take the leaf and macerate it, chew it up, and rub it on your skin, it has very soothing oils when you have, bug bites, itches. It's not really powerful enough to deal with poison ivy the way jewelweed is, but it is useful. When the leaves are very young in the early summer, they're quite tender and not as fibrous as they are now. So they're a good leafy early green in the springtime. But this time of year, what you start to see that's really edible is the seed stalk. And honestly, the seeds are tiny, and so it would take a fair amount of effort to collect enough seeds to really have a meal. But first of all, they are high in protein because they are a seed, and they're easy to pick. All you're going to do is you're going to run your fingers, especially after they're dry, right up the stalk, and then you end up with the seeds in your fingers. And that can be just, strewn on top the way you might sunflower seeds on top of a salad. And they have a nice flavor. It's a seed, I don't know how to describe flavors. I have to work on that skill maybe, but they have a nice flavor, and it's not particularly strong, and that is a high protein source of food. So plantain seed might be a good sprinkle on a green salad, or you could throw it into anything where you're looking to add a little extra to it.
Sarah, I have a
Yes,
question. Could you, as you go along and identify these plants, could you let us know which ones of these are actually native to our area versus introduced?
Yes, that's a great point. Thank you. And don't feel bad about asking me if I forget to say something, because yes, good question. So this plant, I'm going to mark it with this little red flag. So this is a non-native plant. As compared to the next plant, which is right next to it. Whoops, sorry. There we go. Some of you may know this as well. It's a common, roadside plant. This is wood sorrel. And you identify wood sorrel as compared to, say, clover because it has heart-shaped leaves. So these are the heart-shaped leaves as compared to white clover, which looks like that. So I'm not going to put 2 flags here. I feel, well, maybe I can. I'll put 2 flags here. Hopefully nobody comes along and moves them in the next little bit. Well, first of all, I should ask you, do you think the flags, should I go ahead and do that? Is that a good thing? Does anybody have a sentiment about that? If I do this? All right, I'll start off doing it.
I'd like you to leave flags. I'd like to go check them out in person.
Okay. I mean, I'm happy to do it. I figured, it's possible where they're really in an obvious place, people may disturb them, but hopefully not. At any rate. So yeah, so here we have the wood sorrel, and you can eat any part of the wood sorrel plant. The leaves have a really nice lemony flavor, and so I use them in place of lemon to cook fish, for example, because I could cook the wood sorrel leaves right with the fish. They don't hold up well, but they do give a good flavor, a good, and I didn't have to buy a lemon, I guess. And it's everywhere. It's all over your lawn. So as long as you don't have a dog also utilizing your lawn, you're all set. All right. Okay, so I'm just at the front of the farmhouse right now for those of you who might come here in a bit. And I'm walking down towards the garden. This is a little bit of a garden here. And the reason I'm specifically going to the garden here, there's a newly emerged monarch who looks like he's got a twisted wing. Oh dear. Poor thing. The reason I'm going to the garden is at this time of year, a lot of the plants that are, the weeds, shall we call them, the things that, the wild edibles, the greenery is lovely, but it isn't very edible for the most part, actually, at this time of year, because, you've watched these leaves through the summer, and they've matured and become tougher and tougher, a lot of times to resist insects, frankly, because the insects have at them all summer long. And so the greenery that is around our homes and wood areas and fields, is the leaves have gotten tough over the summer and they're not as edible. But a place that you can go to find greenery that doesn't have unpalatable green leaves is your garden. Because, well, maybe I should quantify that. If your garden has weeds in it, like mine, then there'll be edible food there in terms of wild edibles. If your garden has no weeds, it's probably a more productive garden. But it's a good place to look for wild edibles at this point. Does that make sense to people?
Yes.
So, for example, one of the things, so this garden has lovely tomatoes that are maturing. It also has some wood sorrel in it. And what I'm specifically looking for is some lamb's quarters. Let me just look along the edge here for some lamb's quarters. Very likely my garden right now has lots of lamb's quarters in it. Incidentally, I'll show you, these are the big seed stalks from the plantain, and you can see like that's actually quite a lot of seed material that you could pull off. So, if you're in the garden and harvesting anyway, that would be available. Let me look for, I know I saw lamb's quarters here not that long ago. So lamb's quarters is a really great plant that the iron content on the leaves is actually, here we go, here's some. The iron content is higher than spinach, believe it or not. So this is lamb's quarters here that we're looking down on. It has this slightly, here's a good leaf example. I don't know how, is that well in focus for you when I do that?
That's good.
Okay. Whoops, sorry. I want to be able to show it to you. So at this time of year, it has green flowers, and it has this pinnate leaf that's, gets quite a bit wider. It kind of looks like a spade shape. And so lamb's quarters is great because if it's in your garden at this time of year, it's quite tender. You can pick the leaves and eat them raw. You can, you know, really gently saute them or steam them. Just treat them like you might spinach. They're a pretty gentle leaf. The flavor is not particularly strong, I wouldn't say, but they are high in iron. So that's a great one for, and that is a native plant. It's very common, spreads super easily, but that's one that you'll find around here often. Another one that I saw in here, I left my spade further along the trail. So actually, let me put a flag before I forget to. I'm going to go back and put a flag at the lamb's quarters plant here.
Sarah,
At any rate, yes, go ahead.
can you eat the flowers of the lamb's quarters, or is it just really the leaves?
Yeah, you can eat the flowers, sure.
Okay.
Yep, you can.
Thanks.
Yep. Yeah. Anyway, I left my little spade elsewhere, but I'll just show you at the moment. So we're at the edge of the garden if you do come here. And this plant you might recognize.
Yes.
Many of these plants you probably will recognize as your, you know, as weedy things you find around. This is burdock, and it's right here at the edge of the garden. This is another native plant. And the reason I'm marking it, except I can't because it's suddenly in the hardest part of the garden. That's bizarre. I didn't expect to not be able to put the flag in the garden. There it is. I'm not going to dig it up because I don't have the spade with me yet, but maybe I can later. It's the root that I would dig up the root of burdock and slice it and saute it with other root vegetables. You could also, you know, add it to your wok and use it as much as you would, you know, some chestnut or something like that. So it absorbs, if you're using a sauce, it absorbs the sauce quite nicely, actually. So. So, and the other thing is, I will say about these plants, trying to think what you might, you know, confuse any of these plants with, what the lookalikes are, and I can't think of anything honestly that looks a lot like burdock. It has this leaf that's it's kind of a wavy edge to the leaf, but there's no serrations. At this time of year, it's generally a pretty thick, big leaf, and it will often have these, you know, thistle seed things. The thing about it is that at this time of year, because it has the flowers or the seed head, it'd be hard to mistake for something that would be a problem. So that's convenient. So that's marked for you. The goldenrod has these yellow flowers. There's many types of solidago, and as far as I know, all the solidago we have around here is all native. I can't eat it, and this is one of the things I wanted to talk about a little bit, is that you know, just like with other foods, you're going to have situations where a certain thing may disagree with you. And so when you go out to try wild edibles, I do recommend, you know, you try a little bit and see how it goes down. And if it feels, so what I get with solidago is I just get like an itchy throat feeling. So I've never pressed my luck and continued to find out what would happen. And I don't have allergies to much of anything else. So I'm not sure why that is. What I've eaten of it was the flowers. That's what I know as the primary edible use. Most people make tea with the flowers. I don't happen to be able to eat it, so I have no idea what it tastes like. So unless somebody in the audience has tried it, I can't help you. But it doesn't mean you shouldn't try it. You know, in small quantities, you're highly unlikely to have any problem other than that. Here's this is the very late red clover. Oops, sorry. So the edible part of the red clover is the seed. Is the flower, the purple part. Here's the flower, the leaf behind that grass. 3 leaves. And the flower is, you could use it as a salad topping. You can use it as a trailside snack. And the other advantage to it is, and I'm not going to talk a whole lot about wild edibles, but medicinal plants. I am going to talk about edibles, but the medicinal plants is that this particular one is very useful if you are hydrated but you have a headache. I have found, based on both trial and error and also upon recommendation from a Penobscot elder, that if you eat 5 heads of the clovers, as well as being hydrated, it will often take care of your headache. Okay, so I'm going parallel to the road here, kind of cutting across the field from the garden. Now, one thing about this particular preserve is that it was created with the understanding that there would be an easement put on the land that actually required that this consistently be in agricultural production, which is why there is haying allowed here, as well as conservation-minded things. So, all right. So here I'm just following the road, and I'm going to go on the other side of this stone wall here. Got some nice milkweeds. Milkweeds are edible if you know how to eat them. Not at this time of year, but early in the spring when they come up, the shoots are edible. You have to be a little careful because the spreading dogbane shoots, which are toxic, look similar. So that's one you just have to be sure it's a milkweed. But also more edible, I think, are the pods when they're tiny. So I don't know if can you all see this this milkweed pod here? When they're thumbnail size, the pods don't have the stringy white stuff in them because they haven't matured yet, and they taste like summer squash. And the flowers are highly edible too. So I have to say I eat them in moderation because I think protecting our milkweeds is super important right now. For monarchs and for other insects as well. So I don't eat a lot of it, but as a trailside snack or something to show the kids, it's certainly very, very nice. It is a good flavor. I like the flavor of the milkweed pods in particular. So
Sarah, do you cook the milkweed or do you eat them raw?
I eat them raw. Yep. Okay. Mostly because I don't collect enough to make cooking them worth my while, as a general rule. So here, we're actually on the edge of a stream below the road, just on the edge of the field, and we have some nice cattails. Cattails are great wild edible because once you find them, there tends to be a good collection. so that's useful. So if you're looking for, a lot of something, you might be able to find it in cattails. In the early part of June, the leaf becomes quite edible. The bottom of the leaf, I actually pulled out a few earlier, but I'll show you how to harvest them too. So here's the bottom of the leaf. There, so there's the leaf, and there's the bottom of it. The white part is what you want to eat, and they taste kind of cucumbery. At this time of year, they're really tough, and they're hard to even extract out of the plant. But I'll just show you what you do in order to get them out of the plant. You go to the group of leaves where they're all growing together, and you pull the newest interior ones out, and the base of them is white, and that's the cucumbery tasting part, and they're quite good. Now, one thing about eating anything that's in the water, and generally cattails are in the standing water, is that you do have to be mindful of giardia, and giardia is in a lot of places. So that's something to be aware of. What I tend to do when I'm harvesting cattails is I find a place like this where there is not standing water, and so you don't have an assemblage of rodents like beavers and muskrats, and so the likelihood of having any problem with it is really removed. So I go to a place where at this time of year it's a little easier, especially during a drought, which we're having right now. But you can just go to the edge of the stream, and the stream has dissipated, been eliminated, and so the roots are still wet, but they're not. It's barely even soggy where I'm standing in the cattails. And then in early June, take that back, in late June, these are edible. This is the seed head, but it was the flower. So you can cut off the whole top of this, the whole hot dog part, the whole flower, and you can saute it in a little butter, and you can eat it like a hot dog. It doesn't taste like a hot dog. It tastes like a flower, but it's really good, and there's a lot to it. So if you sauteed those with some other vegetables, you could collect quite a bit early on. People also collect the pollen. I confess I've never done that. People collect the pollen and add it to flour when they're baking. It's highly nutritious. Pollen has lots of protein in it, but it seems like a lot of work, I guess. So I haven't bothered. I like work, but in small doses maybe. And then the other really important part about cattails is, and I dug this up with a shovel earlier, is the root itself. So here's a piece of a root that I dug up. Can you all see that okay, or is there, I don't know how that's better.
That's fine.
Okay. So what you want to do with this root is you can eat it any way you want. You can, you don't have to cook it, but I recommend, they're a little tough. So you want to take the outside off, which requires some washing and then peeling. And then slice it into small pieces and either dehydrate it in your oven or in your dehydrator, and then grind it up and use it as a flour replacement. So I have done this. It is a fair amount of work because digging the roots out is not easy. It's easier where it is, find a place that is not too wet, like I was talking about, but also not dried out completely, because if it's dried out completely, it'll be a lot of work. But sometimes you can find a place where you can pull them out of the ground and get a chunk of the root like this, and have enough to be able to make a couple cups of flour pretty easily. So, so again, it's a lot of preparation, to be able to do that.
Hey, Sarah.
Yes.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
With regard to giardia,
yeah.
would cooking or rinsing it well eliminate the giardia?
Yeah, that's a really good question that I don't fully know the answer to. I realize I tend to eat a lot of this stuff raw. I eat the roots raw occasionally. I eat it doesn't always occur to me to think about that. But I don't know. It's a question.
Peter Heil again. I think I can help.
Okay, great.
Being a physician who's had giardia himself.
Oh.
It's a spore former. So
okay.
It would take a lot of high temperature boiling to really eliminate it if it's there. Washing will generally get rid of it, but it is a spore. It's a spore former.
Yeah, and also it sounds like that would be there would be a potential risk that you wouldn't have good control of unless you were harvesting it, not in the water. So.
Sarah, I've actually
Yeah.
foraged for the shoots just in the very early spring when they're just barely emerging.
Oh yeah.
And
Yeah.
at that point, you can eat the whole shoot. And how I've done it is sauteed it. So again,
Oh.
cooking it to try and kill anything that might be on the shoot. But they are absolutely delicious.
Yeah. Great. That's great. I forgot to put the flag in. Yeah, I didn't mention eating the shoots of them like that. That's a good point. So I'm actually going to leave my clump of plant turned up, and I'll put a bright orange flag or yellow flag on it. So if somebody wants to come look at this, it looks like that. Great. So I see something that I'm going to go check out here a little bit that I didn't see earlier. Let's see. Can you all see? I can't get in there very easily, honestly. Well, maybe. Let's see how wet it is. Can you all see the droops of berries that are up there in that bush? There's big, bright red berries.
Not
Can you all
quite personally.
Not quite. Yeah, let's see if I'll see if I can get in there a little bit closer. Oh yeah, I'm gonna get there. Here we go. A little bit of bushwhacking.
Oh, there they
There. Can you see that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Good. Yeah, they're pretty resplendent actually. None of them are low enough I can get to them, unfortunately, because they've all come up through here. But this is a good one to mention. You can look this up. This is a maple leaf viburnum or high bush cranberry, and it's growing in among a hawthorn. So if you look closely, you might see some thorns, but the thorns are not associated with this plant with the berries. But high bush cranberry is a really great plant. The berries are ripe right now, obviously, and if you find a shrub like this, you can harvest quite a few, assuming you can reach them, and have a nice, they're a tart berry, very edible. Do as you would with cranberries or any berry. Yeah, that's great. And incidentally, there's a lot of, and those are very, those are a native plant, the viburnum. And that brings up a point of, one of the things that I like to at least talk about with folks is that, we all do a certain amount of landscaping, it seems like, around our homes. And an example like that is such that that's a beautiful shrub to have in your front yard at this time of year, I think. The berries are bright red. The leaves at this point are still green. They're going to turn a yellow in a little bit. They're a great wildlife plant, and they're a great foraging plant. So, I personally have stopped planting as many annuals and even perennials around my garden that are not edible because there's so many that are edible that I just kind of go that direction. Anyway, and another one that is not native but is in this shrubbery that I'm in. Well, this is maybe not the best place to show you, but so there we go. That's a rose hip.
Oh.
There are wild rose hips of many sorts, and they're all edible. They're all high in vitamin C. They're all pretty seedy, and so thus a lot of people make rose hip jelly from them because you don't really want to be dealing with the seeds, so it's worthwhile to go through the process of straining it all out and so forth. Unlike that viburnum, high bush cranberry that I was mentioning, that is something that I've made jam out of. It's not super seedy, and it's great that way.
How do you make jam? Do you have to do anything, or do you just throw the whole hip in?
With the rose hips,
Yeah.
I don't use rose. I don't make a rose hip jam because it's too seedy. I only do jelly, or my family won't eat it.
Or how do you make a jelly then?
Oh, I see. Yeah. So the basic process is, well, first of all, the basic process is buy some pectin and follow the instructions in there because it'll give you an idea. But basically, what you're doing is you're making a syrup. Well, first a juice from whatever the berry is. You're making a juice, and then you're adding pectin and sugar, and then it will, if you're lucky, gel.
Right, but do you have to do anything, or do you just throw the rose hips in whole?
You can't just hold. Yeah, you have to strain
when you're cooking them, like you're cooking berries to make a syrup out of them.
Oh, I see. Yeah, you can just throw them in whole.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah, they'll soften enough that you can just throw them in to get all at once. Yep. All right, I'm headed back up towards the road for a moment so that I can go down the other side of this shrub line. You'll notice I haven't gone very far from the house even yet. Because there's so much to eat right here. Okay, so here we are. Well, let's see. I'm going to show you the leaf of the curled dock. I'm hoping to find some seed heads in the near future. So this is curled dock right here. This is a huge one. They don't always get this big. And it has those stalks. I wish I had one right here. I thought I did, but has stalks of brown, but this time of year, I bet there's some over here, brown seed stalks that you can actually identify when you're going 65 down the highway, because they're right along the highway and they stand out really well. But curled dock is a great seed because, again, the seeds are high in protein and they are found in large quantities, usually all at once. The reason why they're not in large quantities here is because it's been mowed so recently. But the seed stalks are big. I'm going to continue walking down this way, so I'm probably going to come across one. And it's related to buckwheat. And so what you do is you can take the seeds and you can roll the whole seed head until the chaff comes off. And on a day like today where it's breezy, it would just blow away. The little brown wings on the seeds would just blow away and you'd be left with just the high protein seed. I have to say, a lot of times, if I'm just adding it to a pancake batter mix or a muffin batter mix, the chaff actually has quite a bit of, sorry about the wind, quite a bit of nice buckwheat taste. So I don't necessarily even bother to winnow it because it's not critical. It's edible, it's more fiber. I don't see any of those stalks. How frustrating. Too much mowing. Yeah, I don't see any of those stalks here. Anyway, I'll look a little bit further afield. So another plant I wanted to show you is over here in the hedgerow. This time of year, let's see. Can you see this big leaf? Less. It's like a big maple leaf. It's on a vine. It's on this vine.
Wild grape.
Yeah, this is wild grape. Exactly. So the leaf itself in the early spring is very edible, and you can use it to wrap up food and eat it that way. The tendrils, which of course, I'm trying to find a good example. Well, this is an old brownish tendril, but a little bit. So the tendrils are the ends of the vines that are. Trying to get that in focus for you. Sorry. The tendrils are these little curled up ends on the vines. Let's see if I can you guys see that at all? At the base of my finger is a little tip to the vine.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay, yeah. So that actually is very edible and also lemony like the wood sorrel. And earlier in the summer it's really good. But this time of year, these are wild grapes, and they're delicious. They're super, super tart. I always feed them to kids when I'm leading walks and so forth, because it's such a shock if you think it's going to taste like a supermarket grape. It's not going to taste like a supermarket grape, but they're great for making a jam, for making like any kind of a bannock bread kind of thing where you want dried fruit in it. So very plentiful if you find a big, overgrown hedge like this. This one also has growing with it, unfortunately, some non-native things, including bittersweet. So this is bittersweet vine. It's going to have those orange, yellow flower seeds. It's clearly not grape, but just be aware that sometimes when you're foraging, you've got these plants that are growing in and amongst each other. But wild grape is excellent. So I'll put a flag here in the field. There it is. Great.
I don't think we have that on the island.
Okay, so I'm gonna kind of make a loop here and walk. Instead of following the trail, I'm gonna walk down the hill along the edge of the field. See what? Oh, here's some. So, are you all familiar with Queen Anne's lace? Maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Queen Anne's lace is actually wild carrot, and so if you dig up the root, it's quite fibrous, but you chop it up and roast it. It definitely has a strong carrot flavor, and in fact, that's one of the best ways to identify the root if you're not certain, is if it smells like a carrot, it's a carrot. There is another look-alike for this plant that is dangerous, and so that's it's a water hemlock. That was one that would be very well advised if you're going to harvest wild carrot. Look up the water hemlock. It's an herbaceous plant. It's not a tree, and get familiar with the differences. It is different, but at this time of year, one of the things you're going to notice is the seed heads on the Queen Anne's lace are pretty distinctive. They look like a little bird's nest, and you won't see that on the water hemlock. You may catch sight of there's a weather station down here. So if that thing on the pole is just the weather station. This is all daisy fleabane. I don't know of any edibility to it, but the bees like it. It's beautiful. It's a good late summer field blooming plant. The other thing I was going to look for down here in this field is daisy. Your basic oxeye daisy. That plant is extremely edible, and at this time of year, usually the leaves would be pretty tough, but where it's been mowed here, those leaves would have regenerated in the course of the season, and so those leaves would probably be quite edible, and something that we could eat pretty readily. So that's kind of what I'm looking for here to be able to show you that. Right now, I'm not seeing it, of course, but I might. So all of these plants that we've looked at are likely to be ones that you could find, you know, around in old fields, in your yard. They're pretty accessible for most people. Any questions that are still remaining while I'm walking around looking for things?
Well, most of the land around us is full of spruce, oak, birch, and white pine, and we don't have open fields.
Okay, good point. So I should have included some of that in this. I could talk about some of the uses for those plants. White pine is highly, the needles are edible. You can literally eat them off the tree, and they have vitamin C in them, and actually quite a few compounds that are good immune boosting compounds.
Oh.
And
Needles?
Yes.
let me just, yeah, while we're all thinking about not being sick, it's good to know. I'm just going to show you somebody who's sitting here. Can you see that?
Pretty.
Yeah.
Oh, what is it? It's a monarch.
It's a monarch, yeah. It's just sitting here. It might be just drying its wings after emerging.
Oh, wow. Oh, I'm so glad.
Yeah, I'm afraid the glare on my phone is such that I'm not seeing very well, so I don't know what you're seeing, but hopefully you're seeing a monarch.
Do you have much milkweed there?
We do. A lot of milkweed here.
Right.
And incidentally, this is a male monarch. And the reason I'm saying that is, I'm trying not to scare it, but do you see where the wing is a little wide right here? I don't know if you can see that, but that's a scent gland. And so that's how I know it's a male. Anyway, I think it probably doesn't want me harassing it anymore. So back to the trees. So the other thing about pine trees is that the inner bark of the pine tree is edible. And the best way to eat that is if you have a pine that's come down, while it's still very fresh, you take a knife and you lay back the outer bark, and the inner bark is a grayish green with a yellow kind of cast to it. And what you want to do is you want to scrape that inner bark away from the wood below it, which is gray or brown. And then you can take it as a strip and either bake it or saute it or cook it over a fire. Sometimes that's the most entertaining way to do it. And it's pretty good. It's surprisingly good. If you get good at the harvesting part, you can actually harvest it so that if you get mostly the layer that's closest to the interior part of the tree and less of the layer that's closer to the bark, that is surprisingly sweet, actually, and less resinous and less fibrous. As you get outwards towards the outer bark, it gets a bit more fibrous. So, of course, most of us don't want to go, cutting up our pine trees necessarily, but if you have one come down, that's a good time to try it out. And the thing about identifying white pine as compared to others, which is, I think, more edible, but the others are not toxic. the white pine has 5 needles. I can actually take you to a pine tree over here. 5 needles in each bundle. Maybe I can fillet a pine branch for you. Let me try that. And at any rate, then you'll know, kind of what kind of tree you got. So the thing about the oaks is that red oaks, the most edible part of the plant is the acorn, but even that is challenging because the red oak acorn has a huge amount of tannin in it, which is very bitter and can be very upsetting to your stomach if you eat a lot of it. So what you have to do is you open up your acorns and shell them, take out the meat of the acorn, and then get into almost boiling water and soak it in that very hot water until the water's turned brown, soaking the tannins out. And you pour off that water and repeat that process about 7 times. And then the tannins will have dissipated enough that you can actually use the meat of the nut. You could put it in a stew, use it like you might in a cookie, like a walnut cookie kind of thing. So if you are fortunate enough to have a white pine, incidentally, I'll show you, not a white pine, a white oak. This is a red oak. This is a red oak leaf. So they have points on them, like red hot fire, so red. A white oak will have rounded lobes. They're much less common. And the white oak acorn can be eaten right out of the shell, the hull of the acorn hull. It's also known as the sweet acorn or the sweet nut because it's more edible than this particular one. Back to the pine tree for a second. I just wanted to show you how to identify these from other pine trees. So this is a bundle of needles here. And there are 5 little needles in that bundle. I'm actually going to go in here with a knife and cut off a piece of a branch and show you. See if I can show you enough of the bark to have a sense of what it would look like. So sorry. I didn't mean to do that to you. So here we have the outer bark, and my knife is actually it's a little hard to do this with one hand because I'm holding a knife and a phone at the same time. So it's a lot easier with a big branch or a big log. But do you see how it's green here? Mm-hmm. So that's the layer of inner bark that you're after. So if I wanted to eat that, this is what I would be eating. And in fact, I'm going to eat it just for kicks right now.
What does it taste like?
It's sweet and it's piney at the same time. This one is a little fibrous because I was getting the outer bark more than I would if I had an older piece of wood, like a bigger piece of wood to work with. So it is a little, I will confess, turpentine-y. So if you're not crazy about that flavor, it might not appeal to you at all. But I think some of that turpentine flavor goes away if you saute it. Probably if you saute it in butter would improve it. So that's a little bit about acorns and pine trees. What was the other tree you had near you, you said?
Well, birch.
Yep. I actually don't know any edibility to birches. There might be some.
And then lots of spruce.
Oh yeah, so spruce, the primary edibility to spruce is early in the spring when the branches have those new buds that are like that brilliant, beautiful green. They're kind of a, I don't know how to describe that color, but at any rate, in the early spring, the ends of the branches will burst with a new bud, and every branch pretty much will do it. Those are delicious. Spruce buds are great food. Of course, the wildlife love them as well, deer and rabbits and so forth. But I highly recommend trying those. I have primarily eaten them with meat because I like the flavor of the spruce with even with beef, which is pretty strong flavor, is good. So trailside snack or with other food.
Do you eat them raw on top of meat?
Yeah, I do. I eat the spruce buds raw, mostly because it's you know, in the early spring there's not been that much delicious to eat yet, and yeah,
Sarah,
it's good.
Sarah, is that all spruce or just particular varieties? Or?
All spruce.
Okay.
Yep. Good question.
You said the sarsaparilla.
Sarsaparilla. Oh yeah. Thank you for mentioning the sarsaparilla. So let me see if there's some sarsaparilla growing along the edge here. Unfortunately, it may have gotten mowed on the edge of the field. Sarsaparilla is the original flavoring for what became root beer, and you can buy sarsaparilla soda at Rising Tide or wherever from the Maine Root Company. My understanding is that it was actually harvested in huge quantities by colonists and shipped back to Europe. And I believe, although I'm not certain, that somehow it was used as a treatment for syphilis, but I don't know how, and I haven't figured out more about that. Thank you for reminding me about the sarsaparilla, because I intended to come over here. And there is a lot of poison ivy here, but let's see. We could compare it to poison ivy, which is actually a good thing to do. So sarsaparilla is a plant that sometimes is confused with poison ivy. Looks surprisingly similar, but it has serrated leaves instead of kind of wavy leaves. Like this is poison ivy here, but let me look a little further. The sarsaparilla, it's the root that people go after, and I haven't made soda or drinks with it, so I'm not familiar with the process. There's certainly quite a lot of sarsaparilla around in most local forests, so it's not a plant I would be concerned about harvesting too much of or something like that necessarily. It's really common, but it's not something I've done myself. There's some more wild grape in here, but I'm not seeing any sarsaparilla yet. Let me go over this way. I honestly wonder what other people on the preserves think I'm doing. Walking around talking to my phone with a headset on. Incidentally, all right, I didn't find any sarsaparilla yet, but this is the curled dock seed stalk I was looking for earlier. This is the plant that's related to buckwheat. And these, I'm just going to strip the seeds off in a sec here. You can see how easy it is to harvest. So now I have all this seed material. I almost had 1/3 of a cup right in my hand right there. So very common, grows everywhere. It is one of those plants that like I wouldn't want to harvest it near a road or something like that, because who knows near a road what things are getting onto it. But you'll find it in old fields and so forth. Just going to look along this hedgerow for a minute and see if I see any sarsaparilla here, because you'd think there would be some.
What do you do with the seeds from the curled dock again?
I tend to just take them as is and not winnow them and put them into flour for any baking mix like pancakes or muffins or something like that. But you can winnow them, you know, if you like a little less of that kind of fibery. They're pretty drying and they're pretty fibrous. So if you don't like that and you just want the protein and less of the buckwheat taste, then you might want to winnow them, which I usually just do by rolling them in my hands while I'm standing somewhere outside, and the breeze will take away the light chaff pretty quickly. And then basically what's left is between your palms of your hands, and you just drop that into a container. Yeah, unfortunately, I'm not seeing sarsaparilla right here. This is I'll just mention because I came down this trail. This is a trail that goes to Oyster Creek from the top of the hill, opposite side of the farmhouses I started off on. And I'm not going to go all the way down it, but that I did put a flag over there by that corner where we found the curled dock heads. So now I've just turned around and I'm walking back towards the farmhouse, and that red stuff is amaranth that's growing. The Twin Villages Food Bank Farm has their farm on our Coastal Rivers property, and the amaranth is actually used here primarily as a windbreak, so that the wind that comes up the hill is not damaging the food crops on the hill. It's also a good, beautiful buffer. So, yeah, unfortunately, I'm not finding any of the sarsaparilla here, but you will find it in most upland forests below maples and oaks generally. Any other questions or comments about anything we've talked about so far?
Well, I've got a lot of the sarsaparilla in my woods, and I always think of that as kind of like an umbrella.
Like an umbrella for the forest floor itself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But certainly, like you said, when it first comes up, it looks a lot like it's got that reddish leaf like poison ivy.
Yeah, right. And even the interior part of the leaves can stay red for a little bit, but that dissipates after a while. And really, because the serrations, if you look carefully, you'll be confident after a bit that it's not poison ivy.
I just Googled sarsaparilla, and it says here that it's no longer used in making root beer or anything, and that it contains a compound recently banned by the FDA due to its carcinogenic effects.
Right. I had forgotten that, but that is the primary reason it's not eaten in large quantities. I don't think that most people are aware of that, fortunately, now, who are harvesting it, but that's a good, very important point.
Sarah, I have a question.
Yeah.
When you were talking about the high bush cranberry, you mentioned that there was a hawthorn tree there.
Yeah.
What about anything with the hawthorn?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I didn't see any hawthorn haws, they're called. The fruits for that bush weren't evident when I was looking at it, but yes, hawthorn haws are edible. They're quite seedy. I don't find them one of the more rewarding plants because they're not a flavor that I seem to be drawn to. But they're a fruit, they have sugars, they have starches in them. You certainly could, for example, if you were making a general kind of like bannock or pemmican kind of bread or something like that and just wanted to boost the amount of vitamins in there, you certainly could round out with that. Like I say, I haven't found a good way to really use haws, I guess. But
Okay.
doesn't mean there isn't one. I'm just not something I'm familiar with. Yeah, but they're very common. Most old hedgerows have plenty of, it's over this side of the field, just in front of us. Plenty of hawthorn around here.
Great.
Good. Well, that is pretty much what I had for us today. I do encourage you, if you would like to check in on any of these plants, come walk around and try to find my flags. If you end up with questions, you're welcome to email either Angela or myself and find out more. We will send you a follow-up email with some of these resources that we've talked about, and I appreciate all of you being able to chime in and participate, so thanks very much.